So welcome everyone. Tonight is a special Teen Science Cafe. Let me pop up my slides for a moment. So as you come on in, I'm gonna pop in the chat right now. If you need our live captioning, just click on the link that I just put into the chat. And we love to know who is joining us. So if you all could find your chat box and tell us who you are and where you are coming from tonight. We just think it makes it a lot nicer to just do a quick greeting to everyone. I'm Lauren Traster. I'm the 4-H Teen and Leadership Program Coordinator for UVM Extension, and I facilitate the Teen Science Cafes. We'll be introducing our guest speaker in a moment, but I see that Lily's joining us tonight. Leo's here. Ava May is here. I know we have some others. Adney, all right, from Maine. Those who've come before always know I give a big shout out to Maine because that's where I grew up. So thank you for joining us tonight. So keep introducing yourselves in the chat, because again, we do love to know who is joining us. But the other thing that I really need everyone to do is if you open up your participant list, your name's gonna pop up as the very first name. I need you to make sure that you're showing up as who you are and how you registered. We do match who's here with the registration list. So that way I know who you are. Please put at least the first initial of your last name as well. A few of you have the same first name, and it makes it easier for me to be able to check who is who. So I appreciate that. If you have trouble changing your name, again, just participant list, hover over your name, and you'll see an option to rename yourself, and just put your first name, last initial as how you would have registered yourself. So thank you for that. Moving along, just want to remind those of you who've been here before, but if you're new to our Teen Science Cafes, we do have some guidance. I don't want to call them rules, but ways that we just like to participate here in Zoom. We ask that you stay muted unless you want to ask a question. And again, you can do that by finding your name again on the participant list. And one of the options is going to be to raise your hand. And then we would tell you to unmute yourself. If you do this in your video, chances are we probably can't see you because we can't see everyone's video at the same time. But also if you don't want to talk and ask your question that way, you can use the chat box. This is going to be a very interactive cafe. You're going to be doing some cool activity tonight. But the chat box is going to be used to ask questions, to give responses back to our presenter or general comments. We ask that you be really courteous and respectful in the chat. Make sure you're not using the chat inappropriately so that it's distracting to other people. We really want you to focus on tonight's presentation and just engage with what is going on. It's your choice to have your video on if you want. It's also your choice to have it off. But if you do have your video on, just make sure that there's nothing distracting going on behind you. Don't be moving around your house. Just try to stay in one location. So again, that it doesn't end up being a distraction for others. So before we get to tonight's topic, I do want to remind you all, tonight's presentation is actually part of a month-long Discover Engineering activities that we're doing. This is Engineering Month. It's National Engineering Week at the end of this month, and we are promoting engineering by doing a ton of programming for you all to learn about engineering, do engineering contests, learn computer coding. We have Teen Science Cafes like tonight's that has an engineering focus. So you might want to check out some of the other activities that are going on. We have a Rube Goldberg challenge. We have a create your own invention contest. We do have another Teen Science Cafe at the end of the month that is going to be focused on a student who did an internship with NASA, helping to improve the spacesuit. And then we do have a coding program that started last week, but you can easily catch up if you want to join in tomorrow night, because we do record the session, so you could catch up and then be right on track for tomorrow night. So you can find out about those programs at the website listed on the screen, and we'll pop that into the chat a little bit later on. So tonight's presentation is part of a new program that we are launching this summer called the AgroTek Innovation Summer Academy. This is a really cool program. It's a free summer academy, week-long summer academy that will take place at UVM. The program website was just put into the chat, so you can check that out later on. But tonight's cafe is one of the topics. We're going to have 2 different summer academies. Each has a different topic. Tonight's topic is going to be one of those week-long programs. So you're going to learn more about it. You'll be able to ask questions later on, but I do want to put a plug in for this because you get to come to campus and you get to do some real science research, which is going to be very fun. So let's get to the main show tonight. We have our Teen Science Cafe. The title is Design Innovation Mindset, Shifting the Waste to Value Paradigm. Our presenter tonight is Assistant Professor Steve Costell. So let me just tell you a little bit about our presenter. Steve is a designer and an assistant professor in the Department of Community Development and Applied Economics in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at UVM. Costell teaches communication design innovation courses in the community-centered design and public communication programs, where he engages students with strategic design and circular design concepts. Steve leads the UVM Biofiber Lab, which is a research lab that focuses on waste stream mitigation and regenerative material development. So let's all welcome Steve Costell. And I know we're all going to learn a lot tonight about his work and about this opportunity this summer. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, actually, because it's not every day that I get to talk to students outside of my classroom. So this is going to be pretty fun. I'm going to share a couple screens and we'll come to this screen later. Let me find my presentation and go to full screen. There we go. So thank you, Lauren, for the really nice introduction. My name is Steve Costell, and I grew up in the Midwest. So I'm from Northwest Indiana, from the most southern tip of Lake Michigan. So I grew up next to one of our Great Lakes and was really always fascinated with the interaction between where I lived and where I lived was, if that makes sense. So part of that was just really, being interested in the environment around me. And it's something that has continued through my interests as a practicing designer as well as an educator. So today we're going to talk about the design innovation mindset, and we're going to approach it from a systems thinking lens. And I'm going to hit you with a lot of different ways that I talk about design and use design. And so for me, my first experience with design was being a graphic designer, so way more in the visual communication side of things. And so I'm really interested in things such as this diagram that demonstrates the complexity of our food system. And it does it in kind of a simple way, but also a really informative way. It's telling us a lot. It's actually constructing a narrative or multiple narratives of the ways that we interact with the environment. So through biological systems, economic systems, social systems, that all are in play as we navigate this world around us. So, this diagram shows material flows within the food system. And like I said, it shows the flow of money and knowledge, and importantly represented are the figures of humans, right? It shows the many dynamics that are driven by individuals, societal choices, And rather than impersonal principles or laws of nature, it really shows how we interact. So trying to think of how I want to take this to highlight the fact that these different dimensions are involved in the eco-agri-food system, complex and interconnections, the feedback loops that drive the relationships between them. This kind of simplistic system diagram shows this system to illustrate key concepts and linkages to consider between, sorry, I'm trying to look at my script and I'm trying to ad lib. So maybe I'll just ad lib. So it just shows these relationships, right? So we can see, oops, if I go back, the diagram between food wholesalers or grocery stores, the way that it gets transported. And then we can go over to the biological systems and see the interactions of climate change or land use. And so we could follow those arrows and go in all these infinite directions. And all those infinite directions are really based off of choices that we make and the actions that we do. So about 20 years ago, this book came out, but I didn't find out about it until about 10 years ago. And this book is really focused on this idea of circular design and the way that these systems interact. So this book's name is Cradle to Cradle, and it came out, or it was published by an architect and a chemist. So an architect named William McDonough and a chemist named Michael Baumgart. And it presents the integration of design and science that provides enduring benefits to our society from safe materials, water, and energy, and circular economies, and eliminates the concept of waste. So the idea of sustainable design. Much of our economy still depends on consumers buying products, which will eventually throw away. And McDonough and Baumgart point out that there is no away in nature. Waste is food. They urged us to think in terms of cradle to cradle cycles of material use. And they suggested that manufacturers would lease products and reclaim those products to future reuse. So you could think about things that you use like phones or computers and how when they've served the end of their life, what do we do with them, right? So rather than seeking to minimize the harm we inflict, reframes the design as a positive regenerative force. This paradigm shift reveals opportunities to improve quality, increase value, and spur innovation. It inspires us to constantly seek to improve our designs and to share our discoveries with others. And it put forward this framework that really looks at everything as a resource for something else. So it did that in saying that in nature, the waste of one system becomes food for another. So everything can be designed to be disassembled and safely returned to the soil as biological nutrients, or reutilized as high quality materials for new products as technical nutrients without contamination. So if we think about things having multiple lives, cradle to cradle, we could design things that go back to either nature or back to industry, ideally infinitely. So how we design, make, use, and manage things at the end of their life, or at the end of their useful life, has enormous implications for everything from our demand to nature's resources, our carbon impact, and the amount of waste we generate. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is another group of individuals who are concerned with this notion of the circular economy. It defines the circular economy as one that is restorative and regenerative by design, and which aims to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times, distinguishing between technical and biological cycles. So designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. It distinguishes between the technical and biological cycles. as consumption happens only in biological cycles where food and biologically based materials such as cotton or wood are designed to feed back into the system through processes like composting or anaerobic digestion. These cycles regenerate living systems such as soil to provide renewable resources for the economy. Technical cycles recover or restore products, components, and materials through strategies like reuse, repair, remanufacture, or in the last resort, recycling. So that's kind of one of the keys is, as we think about how we use these materials, that recycling should be the last thing that we're thinking about. We should be thinking about ways that we can give them new life beyond just recycling. So what I want you to do really quick is I'm going to jump you to a whiteboard. So I'm going to show you that. And to do that, I need to escape out of this. And I'll put the link to this in just a second, but I want to explain what we're going to do. So I'm going to give you 1 minute, and I want you to look in your trash can and find 5 things. You don't have to take them out, but I just want you to find 5 things. And one thing I want you to do is think about what's it made of and what was it used for. And so after 1 minute, I want you to come back, and there's going to be a link in the chat that'll take you to this whiteboard, and we're going to do an exercise. So I'm going to start a timer, maybe. It's hiding behind my presentation. There we go. And we'll use 1 minute. And while I do that, I'm going to copy the link to share with you all.
So just to clarify, just go look in your recycling bin, identify 5 objects. You don't have to pick them up, just kind of know what those 5 objects are and come right back.
Less than 30 seconds.
And if you've come back,
all right, so
put the link
everybody,
in the chat.
Everybody should be back by now. And I want to explain what we're going to do before we start doing it. So you should be able to see the board, and it has a couple different activities. The first one is up in the top left corner, the one that's titled Waste Audit. And I want you to use these sticky notes to write down the different things that you found in your trash. So to do that, you can zoom into it. So in the bottom corner, you should see a zoom button. And then you can double click on one of those sticky notes and you can type something in there. So you could see I've got like a fruit roll-up wrapper or a biscuit container that's made of paperboard and metal, or a plastic chicken. I guess that should have been a rubber chicken. So double click on those, and you can use the small ones up on the top left. There you are. And if you need help, you could type into the chat and I can try to give you some direction. I see someone's got paper scraps, chip bag. I see tissue. So now, what I want you to do is you should be able to click on your sticky note and you could drag it to the category that it belongs in below. So you could see there's 4 columns. Yeah. And when we drag them in, let's drop them down on the bottom and build our way up. So we're going to stack them up just like we would stack up a bunch of garbage. There's a fly in my garbage. I think there's a play about a fly in someone's soup. So I see Abraham K. You'll want to get the arrow so that you can actually click on things. Right now, I think you have the pen tool maybe, and you're dragging it around. So if you grab the arrow tool, you'll be able to double click on a sticky note and type in all right, we're going to go 1 more minute. Oh, I still see a bunch of stuff up there. Yogurt cups, butter wrappers. So how are we doing? Almost there. So all of those, like the wrapper, the card, butter wrapper. So I'm going to move some of these down to the bottom. So if they were yours, it's okay. And the only reason I'm moving them down to the bottom is I just want to see how things kind of stack up visually. And it looks like a lot of our waste is kind of evenly distributed. There's not a lot of metal, probably because there's some recycling going on. All right. So we're going to come back to this, but what I want you to do is think about a couple of things and just reflect on these questions. Like, how might the amount of waste the average person generates affect the future of our city or our town? I read a statistic that the average person generates 4 pounds of trash, or the average household generates 4 pounds of trash a day. So we're going to come back to Miro, but I'm going to take us back to our slide presentation. And thanks. Somehow I've got blue lines all over and blue arrows showing up all over my slides.
You
Something
can
I hadn't
actually,
anticipated.
you can clean that up if you have to go into the annotate and basically just can't close it out.
I think that we can.
Yeah, it doesn't show up too bad.
All right, so we did that. We looked in our trash, we looked in the recycling, we identified 5 things, and we kind of looked at what they were made of. And then some of you noted what their function was. So these are things to think about as a designer goes to solve problems, right? We have practical needs for the product or the people or the service that we're designing for. And then we have the materials that we're working with. And the ethical designer is one who really considers the best options, not just for the economic part, but really thinking about the environmental impacts. Also thinking about kind of in terms of circular design and relating it to our normal way of thinking in terms of linear design, right? That take, make, waste direction, the extractive process that results in no path beyond sending it into the waste stream. So this idea really feeds into these big issues called wicked problems. Wicked problems are permeated by social dynamics, multiple stakeholders with conflicting agendas, each whom have a different view of the problem and therefore different ideas of how to solve it. So we use the term stakeholder to refer to anyone who has a stake or an interest in the issue related to the problem or is affected by the problem. So you are a stakeholder in this, right? You're impacted by this and you obviously have an interest in this. So one thing that a designer needs to consider are stakeholder relations. Designers are experts in this notion of transversality. So the ability or the responsibility to change perspective regularly in the process to create consistency and relevancy in the final product. Systems thinking is relevant to all professions though, right? And all academic disciplines that deal with life in one way or another, with living organisms, social systems, or ecosystems. So systems thinking is inherently multidisciplinary. System thinking helps us to understand how problems we confront are interconnected. There are no isolated solutions, and we need interconnected solutions so that we can address the needs of multiple stakeholders. So design thinking, this notion of human-centered design. So really centers around our needs and how those needs interact with the environment around us. So design thinking is a nonlinear, iterative process that teams use to understand users, challenge assumptions, redefine problems, and create innovative solutions to prototype and test different prototypes that they make. Design teams use design thinking to tackle ill-defined, unknown problems or wicked problems because they can reframe these in human-centric ways that focus on what's most important for stakeholders. So you can see on this slide that it shows a 5-step process, this idea of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and then test. So we're going to focus on this first one, which we're actually in the middle of right now, and we're going to work to the next one. And then in the Summer Academy, we're really going to focus on ideate and prototype and hopefully get to the point of testing. So within these 5 stages, there's also phases in design thinking: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. So framing a question, identifying a driving question that inspires others to search for creative solutions, gathering inspiration, inspiring new thinking by discovering what people really need, generating ideas, pushing past obvious solutions to get to breakthrough ideas, making ideas tangible. So building those prototypes to learn how to make ideas better, testing those prototypes to learn so we can refine ideas by gathering feedback and experimenting. And then sharing the story. How do we craft a human story to inspire others toward action? So this idea of empathy. This process involves observing, engaging, and empathizing with the people you're designing for in order to understand their experiences and motivations, as well as immersing yourself in their physical environment in order to have a deeper personal understanding of the issues, needs, and challenges involved. So that's really why I asked you to look in your trash, right? It's an environment that you're already familiar with. It's an issue that you're already familiar with, and you have a deep understanding of those issues. That's why we use our trash cans, because we know that we can't let it pile up around us for lots of obvious reasons. So empathy is about creating solutions that are sustainable and focused on all pertinent areas that affect us in the long term. Here, you should gain an empathetic understanding of the problem you're trying to solve, typically through user research. Empathy is crucial to human-centered design process, such as design thinking, because it allows you to set aside your own assumptions about the world and gain real insight into users and their needs. So empathy is also our ability to see the world through other people's eyes, to see what they see, feel what they feel, and experience things they do. Empathy involves learning about the difficulties people face, as well as uncovering their latent needs and desires in order to explain their behaviors. So to do so, we need to have an understanding of the people's environment, as well as their roles and interactions within that environment. So I want to introduce you to another theorist, Terry Irwin, who's really involved with thinking in terms of mindset and posture. So transition design proposes going one step further and asking designers to examine their own value system and the role it plays in the design process. It argues that transition solutions will be best conceived within a more holistic worldview that can inform new, more collaborative and responsible postures for interaction. So that holistic view goes back to that very first diagram that I showed you and thinking about the interaction of systems, right? It's not just this linear interaction of me going to the store, buying a bag of chips, eating it and throwing it away, but it's really considering that whole journey. How do I get to the store? How did I get the money to pay for the chips? So maybe I have a job, and what does that job contribute to? Or when I get the chips and I eat them. So there's the whole food system and looking at where that food came from to begin with. So really the way that we move about the world and starting to develop an awareness of all of those nuances, all of those various inputs or aspects. So a designer's mindset and posture often go unnoticed and unacknowledged, but they're profoundly influence what is identified as a problem and how it is framed and solved within a given context. So Charlotte Deepen takes it another step and really addresses these issues. So to provide good answers, the designer needs to frame good problems. To frame good problems, the designer shall gather relevant information. And to gather relevant information, the designer shall listen and ask good questions. And so that's really what I'm going to ask you to do. So let's go back to our whiteboard. And we're going to answer the how might we question. So let me move out of this. And here we are back in our whiteboard. Oop. So this time, we're going to use these sticky notes that are a little bit bigger. And we're going to come up with some questions, and we're going to use this Scamper technique. So Scamper stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, or reverse. So what I want you to do is come up with a couple of how might we questions. So looking at that waste, right? So looking over here at these different waste items, how can we start to change that waste stream? So how might we? So double click on one of those sticky notes and type in one of your thoughts. And there's no right or wrong answer. And that's really the great thing about this process, is that we just want to use all of these ideas that run through our head, because some of them are going to lead to other ideas. So how might we reduce the amount of plastic that's in my garbage? Or how might we reduce the amount of food waste in my garbage? So try to frame it as a how might we question, though. We're not looking for the answers necessarily. We're looking for the questions that lead us to some of these answers. Oops. So I'm going to give us a minute on that to see where we're at. And you can ask even bigger questions that go beyond just your trash, right? You could start to ask about other elements that are contributing to how might we reduce our reliance on plastic, or how might we look for materials that have regenerative properties. So these how might we questions are a way to frame the challenge you're trying to solve. So compelling questions to spark ideas. They don't have to have an explicit solution, but really helping us to set a framework for creative thinking. We've got a couple questions. So I see one that I actually find really curious because it's something that I've asked. How might we hold eggs in a reusable container? I see some how might we starting. That makes me feel good. How might we reuse paper scrap? So somebody that knows where I'm going with the end of this. How might we stop plastic from getting Yeah, how might we stop plastic from getting to the sea, right? That's a real issue. These are some really good how might we questions, you guys. How might we develop a material that decomposes more quickly, or decomposes quickly? Sorry, I put the more in there. How might we reduce plastic consumption? How might we limit the use of plastic bottles? These are all some pretty thoughtful questions. So the define stage is where we're entering, right? We've kind of went through a very brief empathetic journey by looking at trash and starting to think about trash and the different ways that that waste accumulates or affects us and where it goes. And so now we're accumulating information and we start to analyze our observations to synthesize these types of questions. So the idea is to help us design better products, services, processes, strategies, spaces, or experiences, right? Design thinking helps us and our team to develop practical and innovative solutions. So we value questions when we get to this point, not answers necessarily. So we start from a position of curiosity, and that allows us to find new and different questions to ask. What I like is that you guys keep popping more questions in there. So answers are based on our current questions, which are based on our current assumptions or knowledge. So discovering new questions, broadening our perspective, and being curious versus judgmental will get us much further than looking for answers. Being open to new and different sources of knowledge, combining local knowledge with naive perspectives, working with people from other disciplines or with expertise in adjacent fields gives us these opportunities for radically different insights to emerge. So in my practice, it's not just me in my laboratory, but I work with agricultural producers, I work with engineers, I work with plant scientists. It's through those interactions that we're able to really come up with interesting ideas, interesting questions that we ask and that we get to start looking for solutions for. So this brainstorming, how might we? How might we reduce the waste we produce? How might we eliminate plastics? How might we develop bio-based materials? All of those are starting to emerge as themes, which I think is actually pretty fantastic. So when framing a question, we want to identify what inspires others to search for creative solutions too. We want to be inspired by thinking of or by discovering what people really need. We want to push past obvious solutions to get to some breakthrough ideas. We want to then move to building prototypes and learn how to make ideas better. We want to refine those ideas by gathering feedback and experimenting. And then comes the part of creating the story. So I'm going to jump back to our slides really quick. Oh, present. Oh, go back. There we go. So thinking about these how might we questions, I want you to start thinking about framing your design challenge. So we can look at those questions, and then we need to think about how do we create a design challenge. So some initial ideas we turn into a story. And so this is a simple prompt to help us define that story. I want to change. What is it that we want to change? The waste stream, the way we use plastic, in order to have a desired outcome. And so that's what I want you guys to do now, is think about one design challenge out of these how might we statements. And if you could, type them into the chat and type them as a full sentence with, I want to change, and then what it is that you want to change in order to what? Achieve what kind of desired outcome. So the idea of the challenge is that it should be rooted in action, right? As a designer, we want to engage people to actually take action, to actually make change. So it needs to be relatable and human, and it needs to illustrate a journey, like getting from one point to another, from the present state to the desired outcome. And it ends with a call to action. So human-centered design is also, sorry, I should have mentioned IDEO. IDEO has 3 factors that they consider when thinking about holistic interdisciplinary innovation that makes up the design thinking approach. And these are human factors, technical factors, and business factors. So we'll see those, I think, in this next slide. Oops. There we are. And so through this Venn diagram, we kind of get this complex relationship between feasible, viable, and desirable states. So as we're creating these statements or these design challenges, we want to think about their viability, right? Are they going to be adopted? Could they be used? Are they a good idea? Feasible? Can we actually do it? Do we have the money to do it? Do we have the materials to do it? The technology to do it? The people to do it? Is it desirable? Are people going to want to do it? Are they going to, want to, I don't know, change the way that they bring their milk home from the store? And then you could see where these different areas cross over. It creates different considerations, something being possible or usable or valuable. And ideally, where all of those things intersect is where innovation happens. So design thinking is not an exclusive property of designers. All great innovators in literature, art, music, science, engineering, and business have practiced it. What's special about design thinking is that designers and designers' work processes can help us systematically extract, teach, learn, and apply these human-centered techniques in solving problems in a creative and innovative way. In our designs, in our businesses, in our towns or cities, in our communities. So I'm going to jump back one more time to our Miro board. And I just wanted to show you the value chart. And so the next thing we would do is we would start to take some of those ideas and we would place them into this chart. So based off of the value or the impact that it might have versus how much effort it would take to do. If it's something that's really easy to do, right? And it has high value. So composting, for instance, the state of Vermont requires home composting for food waste. And so if you're able to do that composting, then you could start to amend your soil and that soil could be put into your garden as nutrients, right? And then there's other bigger problems that seem much more unsolvable. They might have a real high effort, but they also have a real high value. So this is one way that we could start to prioritize things that are actionable and easy to accomplish versus things that are really difficult and we need a lot more work and resources to go into. So I'm going to go back to our slide presentation one more time and go to present. There we go. And I want to talk just a little bit about what I do in my lab and how it relates to our summer academy. So I guess first with the Science Academy is there is going to be a design thinking component where we're going to do some actual brainstorming events. We're going to develop some ideas and statements to move forward. And we're going to start to look at the waste stream, particularly looking at renewable or regenerative waste stream. So in particularly, I'm interested in plants and plant material and converting that material to paper. And so this image shows some electron microscopy images of the paper that's behind it. And so part of what I'm interested in is how we can build sustainable materials, how we can build and manufacture sustainable materials, especially for materials that end up in our waste stream. And so these here are looking at industrial hemp and two different types of cellulose fibers from the hemp plant. And looking at them under electron microscopy allows us to see the way that those cellulose fibers bond with each other and how other elements are kind of bridging between those different fibers. So in my studio, I have undergraduate researchers that take these fibers from the field and takes them through a process of cutting them down, of neutralizing the acids that are found in the plant material, removing lignin and pectin, so non-cellulosic material. Just some simple chemistry that helps with that process. And then we cook those plants to release those non-cellulosic materials. We're looking at the plant fibers to make sure they're ready for processing. And we put it into this machine, which pulps it essentially down to a liquid state. So we're adding water to it. So one of the issues that I'm concerned with in my lab is water consumption, the amount of water we use and how we use it. So it goes through this process called fibrillation, which hydrates the plant fibers, the cellulose fibers. And then we pull sheets of paper. So we actually make the paper out of this plant material, which is a really wet process, as I just kind of described or alluded to earlier. And then from this paper, we make different types of prototypes, looking at some basic packaging configurations. So one of the things I'm hoping that the students or the participants in the Science Academy that work with me will help to develop perhaps paper-based seed cups that producers could use to start their plants in greenhouses that they could just put directly into the ground, and then that paper would biodegrade and actually add nutrients to the soil around the plant as it begins growing. So some of the focuses of my lab is looking at regenerative practices through circular design, the development of regional plant fiber shed, modeling local micro manufacturing opportunities, and creating food grade and compostable bioproducts. So with that, we made it through the marathon of slides. We made a big mess in Miro, which I'm going to go back to once really quick. And we formed some really good how might we questions. And I'm curious, I haven't gotten into the chat yet. And I'm going to read.
There were some good statements that a few of the participants wrote.
Yeah, so there they are. I want to change how plastics degrade in order to stop microplastics from harming us. So I believe there's going to be a future Science Academy, maybe in year 2, that's going to talk about bioplastics. The one that I'll be working with uses some very similar base material, so cellulose being one of those. So definitely something related. I want people to change their eating habits in order to reduce food waste. So that's really an interesting one, because it's not just people's eating habits, but there's a whole industry that is about portion size and giving really large portions. So it's not just individual choices. So it might be when you're preparing your meal at home, but if you go out for dinner, a lot of those choices are made by the people preparing your food too. I want to change how things are packaged in order to reduce waste that affects animals, fish, birds, etc. So absolutely starting to be a systems thinker, and it's everything impacts everything else, right? So it's really thinking holistically again. Animals, fish, birds are all part of our ecosystem, or should I say we're all part of their ecosystem. So again, being that ethical designer and considering, beyond our immediate needs and thinking about the environment as a stakeholder as well. And I want to change how food is packaged to reduce waste and improve health. And I'm with you. We know that there are some packaging materials that leach harmful chemicals. Now we have really strict standards in the United States that are supposed to guard against that. But we also have alternative materials that we haven't fully explored that hold a very clean opportunity in that regard as well. So I guess I'll stop it there, and I'd be happy to answer questions. And Lauren, I know that you wanted to.
Yeah, so think about
Say
what
something.
questions you might have for Steve, but I'm going to throw up a quick poll. We just like to know on a scale of 1 to 5, just rate 1 being on the low end, 5 being on the high end, overall. 2 questions, overall cafe experience. And then the second question, what you learned. Did you learn a lot? But you'd say a 5, 1 if you didn't. And we're just going to spend about 30 seconds letting you guys answer this poll. And then we want to take your questions about Steve's work, about the design thinking process, about the summer academies, whatever you might want. You can ask your questions in the chat, or again, you can find your name on the participant list and choose the raise your hand option, and then we'll call on you, whichever that might be. I'm not sure if you saw Steve Lilly put in the chat, I want statement, I want people to reuse plastic bottles, etc., or use less in order to keep the ocean cleaner and keep the animals safe.
Absolutely. And so reusing plastic bottles or developing industries that can convert those materials into mechanical nutrients, right? So I think that's really the powerful thing about your generation, is that you all have that opportunity to be those change makers.
So Ava May asks, how can we encourage these changes in our communities?
Oh, that's a great question. Advocate. Do you have a student club that is concerned with issues and or design? And I think that's kind of the fascinating thing, is that you as a student designer can start these conversations, right? Do you talk to your science teacher or your math teacher or your English teacher about any of these issues? And how can you engage in those conversations? Do you talk about it with your family or your friends? Really thinking about how it takes conversations, right, to have any kind of change come about. We can't make somebody do something because they're going to be resentful if they're told they have to do something. So we have to figure out ways to make them want to participate, thinking about strategies to incentivize their participation. I thought I saw Swedish fish, which is my favorite candy, by the way. Swedish dishcloths, bees wrap, or some alternatives. Absolutely. I'm on a listserv, and there was actually someone inquiring about a vegan alternative to beeswax-based wraps. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. And we know that plants have the potential to create waxy substances. So why don't we have an easy vegan alternative?
questions? Anyone wondering, have any questions about the Summer Academy? I know the work that if you choose to apply, there is an application. We also do realize that the link that we gave you isn't working, and we'll send that out to you once we get that up and running again. There is an application process. There'll be 12 participants chosen for each of the academies. Steve talked about the academy, which was that he'll be running. And we had a cafe a couple of weeks ago on our other topic, which is focusing on, I forget the title. Sorry, it's like soil health and farming and traditional ways of linking, thank you, Sarah, culturing cells for healthier soils. And if you missed that cafe, we have a recording of it that you could watch. Hopefully some of you will consider applying for the Summer Academies. Again, it's a free program. You'll spend a week living at UVM in the dorms, doing some very cool research, going on some field trips, getting to hang out with other teens like yourself doing the project. You'll then work on an independent project or a group project throughout the summer and come back to campus and share your work, hopefully with professors and interested parties who are working in that field. So it's a really exciting opportunity for you all. So if you have any questions, I'm going to give about 30 seconds. Otherwise, we will thank Steve for presenting his work. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you think of a question after tonight, you can always just reach back out to us because we are here to, answer your questions. All right, well, thank you all for joining us. It was great, and hopefully we might see some of you this summer at the Academy.
Thank you all.